Hi everybody, it's Joey Remenyi here from seekingbalance.com.au. I'm a vestibular audiologist and I'm a neuroplasticity therapist. And I really enjoy supporting people through their recovery of complex and chronic conditions that include vertigo, dizziness, or tinnitus. And part of our healing is really a huge self-study and self-discovery process. And I have been through this, and for me, and I know this is not true for everybody, but for me, music has been a really important part of my own personal self-discovery process and healing. And I have written songs and I use music in my rocksteady process that many of you know about. But I also love to be touched by other musicians. And so today I have a real treat for us all because I'm going to introduce you to Fia, who is a musician based in Sweden in Europe. And you're just going to love her. So welcome to the call, Fia, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
Pleasure.
So I have to say, a friend of a friend sent me a YouTube to your song, which is Yes and More Please. That was my first introduction to the world of Fia. Love those lyrics. And this is, I think, why I love listening to your music. It's all about the lyrics. And it feels to me that we're two women on literally opposite sides of the planet. But it almost felt like you were singing my journal, like my own journal writing. And I would love you to share a little bit about your journey of discovery. And maybe if you want to let the listeners know who you are, where you're from, and what's brought you to this singer-songwriter raw sharing space, because I know we don't just arrive there, it's a process. So tell us a little bit about how you came into this singer-songwriting space.
Yeah, so I've been making music my entire life, and it's been my way of interacting and processing the world as a highly sensitive person. And always been writing songs. And in 2015, I went to a place in Sweden which is called Ängsbacka. And Ängsbacka is a course and festival and retreat center. And there's also a live-in community there. And it's all focused on just personal transformation and bringing in different traditions and different ways of approaching that. So I went there for a whole summer, being in their volunteer program. So I was there supporting during the summer festival season. And there I really got immersed in conscious community for the first time. I met people who were also looking inwards and saying, well, who am I? What do I want? What kind of life do I want to live? And most of all, realizing that I am the creator of my life, that I get to choose how I interact and respond to what happens around me.
Yeah.
And I came home after that summer feeling really activated and alive. But I was like, I didn't have a job. I was living with my parents, and I did not really know what to do, other than I knew that I wanted to continue to write music. So in this process of kind of like trying to figure out, okay, how am I going to do this? I noticed a shift taking place in the kind of songs that wanted to be written through me. And these more intimate, raw, and very personal, but at the same time very transpersonal songs started to come through. So in the autumn of 2015, it was like someone pushed a button and all of a sudden I was writing these kinds of songs. And since then I've just been on this ride and continuing to listen and just allow the songs to come.
Yeah, which is actually exactly how I write my music. And I'm the same, grew up in a musical family, and music has been my language, or possibly my first language. And when I go through difficult times, whether it's, a breakup or, big adult feelings, I will come to my music and write about it. And maybe no one else will even hear it. It just feels it's such a beautiful way to express the emotion and the feeling.
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier that you're HSP, high sensitive person, which I am too, and I am absolutely certain so many of our listeners are HSP. If you've never heard of this, I got this book out. It's Dr. Elaine Aron. This changed my life, this book. And I've heard Fia interviewed before, and she's mentioned this, and I thought it's really worth bringing this to the attention of people listening on this podcast, because it's all about normalizing having a high acuity and a high sense of taking in the world. And so my listeners are really familiar with neuroplasticity and how the brain works, because this is the journey they're on for their healing. And when we're a high sensitive person, it's kind of like we need to sleep more, we need to rest more, we need to take a break from the world, because it's just too stimulating. And that does not make us sick or abnormal. It's actually 20% of the population. It's like being blonde or brunette, you know, it's just a feature. And many HSP people are highly gifted. They're seeing the subtle, invisible things that other people miss, and they're highly creative. They're lateral thinkers. And so we occupy space in the world in really important ways. However, we're vulnerable to anxiety and depression and burnout and all of that side of it. So how did you learn about HSP, Fia? Do you want to maybe talk us a little bit through how you came to that?
Totally. Yeah. So I always perceived myself as being different, and different in the way that I didn't have as much and when I moved around in the world, I often felt overwhelmed. I felt as if I needed more space. I would often withdraw, and I noticed how that caused friction in my life with other people who were like, what's not what's wrong with you, but why are you so strange? Why do you want to leave all the time? Why can't you just suck it up? Why can't you just do it? You know, all these phrases. And it was when I was a teenager, I would say I was maybe 16, 17. My godmother said to me, Fia, I think you might be highly sensitive. And she gave me a book in Swedish, which is called Drunkna inte i dina känslor, which translated is like, do not drown in your emotions.
Aww.
And I read that book, and it was written by two women, and they described this book. This is the book that we wish we would have had all throughout our lives. This is the handbook. And it really was. For the first time, I felt understood, I felt seen, and I felt valued and appreciated in my sensitivity. So that book came into my life and gave me all this like understanding of the trait that it is, like the science behind it, but also really dived into emotionality and like the complexity of having this trait and interacting with the world in a way that feels good. So here I got tools of how I could empower myself and actually turn what I felt was a burden and like a curse to my superpower, and actually part of why, like seeing it as a huge part of my brilliance, my uniqueness as Fia. Yeah, that's how it happened.
And I think I was in my mid-20s when I came across this book, and to be honest, I cannot remember how, but divine timing, it landed on my doorstep. And at that time I was living in Melbourne, which is the kind of the big city, and I was seeing all these vestibular clients. And I was at Melbourne University. I remember sitting in lunch breaks just being like, I have to get out of the building. It was, too many bright lights, and I felt like a freak. I was like, I can't even sit down and have a lunch break with my colleagues because I really need fresh air. I need natural lighting. I just need to go and sit by a tree and like recuperate myself and then go back and finish the next half of my day. And this book really explains all of that and normalizes it. And I have to say, it's probably a little bit why I began to leave the mainstream university structured treatment models, because this book gave me permission to say, well, actually, I see the world differently. I feel the world differently. There's things I'm seeing that other people are missing, and I can create magic out of this. And that's really how Rocksteady and Seeking Balance were born, is I suddenly had this permission to be different and to see that as a strength instead of a weakness. So that's where I suppose coming in contact with your music and listening to this, I'm like, I totally get this. This is very much a journey that I resonate with. So can you can you share a little bit with us about what was it like for you? Because this is what a lot of our listeners will resonate with. And you were so fortunate to get this really young, by the way. What a gift. But what was it like for you when you were do you remember when you were feeling like, I'm not fitting in here, like I've got to keep withdrawing? Do you actually remember that time, or is it so far back now that you've outgrown it?
No, I remember. Like the first, I can go way back, and that was when I was younger than 10. Don't really know exactly, but I was with a friend, and I would remember, like, I would visit her quite often, and we would play, and all of a sudden I would feel I'm full. I want to go home. And I would just say, I need to go home now. And I just left. And years later, when we were older, she told me, Fia, I never understood. You just stood up and you left. And then I could see through my filter now, like, oh, I was just done. It was full. I couldn't take in anymore. Also, she had a father that was not really the friendliest and kindest person. So anytime he would come home as well, the whole atmosphere in the house would change. I would not feel safe anymore. So that would also be part of me, like, okay, it's time for me to go. In teenage years, it would look like me arriving to parties, staying 20 minutes, often just like on the side or in conversation with one person, and then I'm like, okay, that's it. I just need to go home if I can sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in my school years as well, I can see that it was really hard for me to receive any kind of criticism or even like constructive feedback, because I felt so wrong. I felt as if it was just as if these words were like needles, and I just couldn't handle it. And I would cry so often. I would cry all the time in school. And yeah, it just felt as if, what is wrong with me? Why can't I just handle things in a way that normal people do? Why can't I just be fine and just like brush it off and not care so much?
And I think thank you. I think you've really beautifully described what so many of us are feeling. And the interesting thing with this HSP phenomena, it's not a diagnosis, it's not an illness, it's just the way our brain works, is it can actually present later in life. So some people have this kind of non-sensitive way of being in the world, so they can go out to the big parties and be in crowds and be in groups and squeeze 5 things into a day, whereas I can do 1 thing a day and I'm done. Like, I've got to really pace myself, and overdoing it is a real challenge, a real thing. But some people actually get this later on, so it can be hit them at the age of 30 or 40 or 50. Suddenly they're like, what's wrong with me? I never used to be like this. Well, you can actually be a late onset HSP, and I think that's really nice to know, that you're still normal. It's just that now your brain is operating in a different way, where it's taking in so many details, and it's taking in visual information, it's taking in sound information and movement, vibration information. It's having to process it all. And as a HSP person, and they look at this on functional MRI brain scans, the brain is pinging like crazy. Like, there are neurons going all over the place, processing everything rapidly. And so, yeah, within 20 minutes, we're done. We're exhausted. We're like, hi, bye. Okay, I need to go now. Or an hour. Whereas for the other 80% of the population, when they're in that exact same situation, their brain is just pinging at a really nice leisurely rate, so they can stay at the party longer. They're not getting exhausted and overstimulated. So I think it's really nice to bring it back to there's a spectrum of normal, and there's neurodiversity out there, and also that we change with time. And I'd love you to speak on this as well, Fia, but I think I've noticed I have times of feeling more robust and more resilient, and I can last longer. And I'm like, I surprised myself. I'm like, wow, I was at this festival and I really enjoyed it, and I could stay out. I surprised myself with my capacity. And then other times, perhaps I am more sensitive and need more alone time. Do you notice a similar thing yourself?
Absolutely. So, um, the most obvious thing might be like my work. I'm an artist. I give concerts. I interact with people on a big level. Um, and some like in that case, it's always like I'm when I am where I'm supposed to be, when I'm exercising and living while I'm here. It's very easy for me to be in front of thousands of people,
Mm-hmm.
um, and just give of myself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like outside of that, I noticed when I take good care of myself, when
Mm-hmm.
I get enough sleep, when I eat well, when I have a lot of alone time, when I move my body, I become more resilient.
Yeah.
Also, one very big thing for me has been to live in tune with my menstrual cycle. So,
Yeah.
as someone who identify as a woman and having that kind of reproductive system, of yeah, just of menstruating, I noticed when I really started to listen and hone in on the different qualities of my cycle,
Mm-hmm.
my life started to flow easier.
Mm-hmm.
So, like my calendar, I schedule according to how I bleed,
Yeah.
so that I put the most challenging things, such as maybe going into a hard work meeting where I need to be really on point, or if I'm going to travel a long distance, I put that when I'm in my spring or summer cycle, when I have my most energy. So
Yeah.
that has been really key.
Yeah.
Just understanding that there are parts of me where in times where I am more energetic, when I have more resources, and time when I am meant to pull back
Yeah.
and
I'm
harness the gifts of that.
I'm so pleased you mentioned that. And so for people who are perhaps new to this concept,
Mm.
it's an age-old practice. I've been living and living in sync with my menstrual cycle like almost always. I was really blessed to learn about this through my yoga apprenticeship and yoga traditions. And so a few ways we can look at it is, so there's roughly a 4-week cycle, 28 days, but there's kind of like a week 1, 2, 3, and 4. And when we're bleeding, that's often when we want to go in and be really quiet and nurturing and retreating. And also we can have great intuitive connection, so ideas can really blossom and flow. And this is when we can really get to know ourselves, I think, a little bit better, when we kind of, in a healthy way, shut the world out and come back into ourselves. And that can be, even if it's just a day or two where we go really deep, there's kind of a week of quietness. And then the next week, so that could be, I suppose, winter. Then the next we move into spring, where it's like new ideas, new projects. We're starting to get a little bit of energy and we can see where we want to put our energy, but we're not fully committed yet. And then we move in towards ovulation, the middle of the cycle, and we're bright, we're extroverted, we're out there, we're like, look at me, I'm glowing, I've got great ideas. And our hormones are telling us to please people. Like we literally have these people pleasing hormones that are like, get out there and smile big and be happy and connect. And this is moving us into summer, like bright and light, and we just want to go for it. And then the last week of the cycle, it's wrapping up loose ends, it's closing conversations, it's shutting down projects that don't serve us, it's cleaning up the calendar, it's clearing things, and that's autumn. And that's when we're wrapping up and we're making sure we have a nice empty calendar for that winter cycle that's coming up again for the bleeding. So living a life like that, I have found, well, for me, it's just kind of normal. It's like all I've done. But it really is, I think, effective to honor those body energies and body cycles, so we're not kind of fighting ourselves. And as women, it does happen for men too, by the way, but for women it's happening just more frequently on that monthly cycle. And the reality is we have one body, we're living in this body, we may as well get to know, what do you call that, like the user manual. It's like, how do I take care of this? And I think exploring the relationship with the menstrual cycle, and if you're pregnant or menopausal or not yet bleeding, you can follow the moon. So there are still ways to be in sync with the cycle.
Yeah.
And that same applies if you're on any kind of contraception, you can follow the moon.
Mm.
So thank you for bringing that up. That's like, actually, I think I heard you've done some shamanic studies.
Yes, so I'm deeply anchored in the northern shamanic tradition, specifically the path of the Völva here in Sweden.
Can you share a
So,
little bit about what that is? I've done some shamanic studies in Australia. I'd love to hear what you
mhm,
do in Sweden.
yeah, for sure. So, I this spring I just completed a 2-year journey of studying with a high priestess here, together with a group of other 18 women,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really the first year was focused on healing ourselves. So it was going deep into the body and doing all the ancestral clearing, all the trauma clearing, just bringing back ourselves home and owning our history and story.
Yep.
Year two was really focused on the Nordic year wheel and the goddesses specifically that we have here in the north. So
Mm-hmm.
Skade, Saga, Hel, and everyone else, and working with the different seasons and the different energies that are present throughout the year, and
Mm-hmm.
how to create magic around that and hold ceremony. So also the path of the Völva. The Völva is the seeress in the Nordic tradition who uses ecstatic divination through. She travels into different dimensions through the use of ecstatic singing and her staff.
Mm.
So she goes to gather information for herself, for the community, whatever the purpose of the journey is, and to bring that through. She becomes a channel. So either she speaks and allows other, whatever the purpose is, she might allow someone to speak through her. She might sing prophecies. There's a lot of mysteries, but that's kind of like a short version of it.
Beautiful. Yeah, it was. I did I'm connected with the School of Shamanic Womencraft in Australia, and it's connecting back into the seasons, listening to the cycles of nature, and really a lot of it's about diving into the mystery and being okay with that, and also
Yeah.
being okay with exploring the darker sides of our life instead of denying it, ignoring it, suppressing it, putting it back here, and just pushing forward, which is kind of mainstream living in a nutshell. It's about taking time out and dropping back and listening to not only Mother Earth around us and her beautiful natural seasons and cycles, but also dropping into the body and those seasons and cycles and stories within us. And I think, as you touched upon, some stories we're carrying are not even ours, and they're actually draining us, they're exhausting us. They don't belong in our energy body, and we need to identify them so we can clear them and come back to our own sovereignty and integrity.
Yeah.
Which is really powerful. I've got another question for you, Fia, about your connection to whatever language you want to use, God, source, universe. I know for myself, I have quite a fluent language. I'm not particularly addicted to any language, can be on my mood. But I do know that when I'm feeling in alignment with my purpose, and when I'm feeling like I'm speaking words of truth and really coming from my heart, things flow easily, things come through me. I feel energized. Um, I feel the opposite of needy. Like I feel really content with myself, with no expectation on others. So there's like a few markers that help me know when I'm really in alignment. And I suppose also markers when I realize I'm not in alignment and I'm operating from fear. Do you have a similar thing going on for yourself? And would you care to share it?
Mm. It's very similar to yours. Like I how I know that I'm in alignment is that my life is flowing easy. It's there is, I feel as if even if I come up against challenges, I feel like I know how to take them on.
Mm-hmm.
I feel as if there is a flow, there is a movement. I feel as if I am actually like engaging with life.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm off center, I feel as if it's a lot more challenging. I might go into like, why is this happening?
Yeah.
Where am I going? Um, I can also can notice the shift in my body. like feeling tired, feeling heavy, feeling stagnant.
Yeah.
In opposed to feeling expansive, feeling open, feeling shoof.
Yeah.
Okay, here I am, and we're doing this.
Yeah. And the other one for me that I found really useful is when I'm connected to my truth and in alignment, I think, with my relationship to the broader planet, I feel big, like there's a big feeling. Whereas when I lose that, I feel really small and I shrink, and I feel like this terror, and it's like I need approval from other people, or I need to seek permission, or I need to go and ask an authority. So there's this, like, it's really, I think, quite distinctive. And the reason I wanted to bring this conversation is for anyone listening to this conversation, I think it's really nice to have these markers for yourself. How does it show up in your body, in your mind? It could be simple things like, when I'm in flow, I can really connect easily with the conversation in my mind. But when I lose my alignment, I'm bombarded with lots of chatter, and it's fast and it's aggressive and it's critical and it's messy. And so it's not that we shame ourselves about that. It's more like, oh, whoops, I'm off. So then I need to use all my skills and tools to bring myself back. And that's where I think ritual comes in. And that's what the Rock Steady Toolkit's about, that my clients are exploring. It's, well, how can I come back to center when I've identified I've lost it? And so a huge one a lot of my community uses, and I still use, is body scanning. So really coming back into what am I feeling in my body, and where am I in the presence? And self-compassion, and then possibly some journaling tools and music. I'm curious, do you have any little rituals that help you come back into alignment if you notice your energy scattered all over the planet and you've got to really bring it back in?
Yeah. So I have a morning practice that I try to keep, that I intend to keep solid and being as like a fundamental. And it's a part that I'm bringing back, and that is a yoga practice. So yoga was my, like, one of the doors for me to realize that I'm connected to infinite consciousness, that I am infinite consciousness. And it's been like on and off. And now in my life, I am feeling the need again to have a solid practice in the morning. So yoga, then it's just nature.
Yeah.
Nature, being outside. I feel as if everything just falls into place when I'm in the natural surroundings.
Yeah.
It's like I'm reminded of my place in nature.
Yeah.
As part of our whole system.
And I feel like we don't get reminded enough that we are nature. Like, we are part of Mother Earth. We're a miracle. We're living in this incredible, complex, natural phenomena and organism. And I think we often don't really value that. Like, we are a living miracle as a human being, as a creature, as an animal. And I think for myself, when I do go to nature, and I love the ocean, I live by the ocean, that can also just be really nice to be in that. It's like an overwhelm in a really nice way. It's being in awe of what Mother Nature brings, and that a wordless space, even, it's a clear space.
Yeah.
And I know for some of my clients who feel at some points that they can't leave the house because they may feel debilitated, I guess that would be something to open up to. It's like, well, how can I connect to nature even when I am feeling tender and limited in that moment? Can I just look out the window and connect to the clouds? I massively follow the moon. I'm always looking for the moon. And there are some really nice ways we can connect to nature if we don't have money or we don't have mobility. And so, yeah, I really hear you on that one. And can I ask, are you working on any new music at the moment?
Yep.
Have a little anything you want to share with the listeners, just in terms of like maybe your project, or where your next I suppose channeling might be coming through?
I'm exploring a lot of different paths. I'm working both here in Sweden, and I'm working internationally online. with different fellow creatives. It's very much in a seedling state, so there's not so much to talk about. But there is music, yeah.
Exciting. Exciting. Well, it's just so beautiful to connect with you. I highly encourage anyone who has enjoyed listening to some of my music that I put out there. It's just a really simple guitar and female voice. Fia's got 3 albums of incredible guitar and female voice. Her lyrics are literally like reading my journal. So I really think you're going to connect to the lyrics if you know me and know what I like to go on about. I'm sure you'll really connect to Fia's music. I actually found Fia while I was in postnatal, just giving birth. I was cracked wide open, and my husband would just listen to Fia on repeat. he'd be like, "What is this, like positive brainwashing?" I'm like, "Yes," because it's really uplifting music and really, I don't know, it's just, in a sense, it feels like having a conversation with a friend by listening to music. Which I know is what in the 70s and 80s people would say about Carole King. So like there's something very raw about music. So visit Fia, and her website is fiasmusicofficial.com. I'm going to post a link underneath the podcast and the YouTube channel. Check her out. I'm pretty sure you'll just adore her as much as I do. So it's been a real pleasure meeting you today and connecting. I know there's Swedish people in my community, so I don't know if you wanted to say any passing words to them in your own language, but please do.
Ja, tack för att ni har tittat, tack för att ni har lyssnat. Ja, jag hoppas att ni fick någonting ut av det här samtalet.
Beautiful. I'm just really enjoying having this international connection, and in many ways in this day and age it's just getting easier and easier. So this is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom on alignment, ritual, shamanic work, and HSP, and keep following your creative vibes because you're very talented, and can't wait to see what you come up with next.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I'm Joey Remenyi from seekingbalance.com.au. If you are wanting to visit me, visit my workplace, and I support people with vertigo, dizziness, and tinnitus, help them coming home to their body, and doing a lot of this work that I've been talking about with Fia. It's really deep self-study. It's really sacred work, actually. And you're welcome to join my community in many ways. So it's a little bye for now. And again, thank you so much, Fia.